I call this Newberry County School District Board Work Session to order. We have a quorum present with all members present except for Ms. Reeder, and it's our understanding that she is going to be joining us. So, do I have a motion to approve the agenda? Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, Mr. Suber.
Okay, Madam Chairman, members of the board, during this work session, obviously, we're going to discuss our COVID-19 updates with you and planning for the 2021 academic year. During the update, we'll start with Dr. Ware and Ms. Ulch, and then we'll talk to you a little bit about the family and staff surveys that we did and what those results look like. We've already informed our principals of this, but we wanted to share the results with you first. The principals we'll put it out there for the general public as well on our website, but the schools will also be able to get a report that is specific to their school and what their results were like. So we'll release all of that after we get through here today. We'll talk a little bit about the reopening decision tree, as the State Department is calling it, and Dr. Carey and I will cover that. And then we'll go into some operations reports that are associated with COVID-19. Mr. Rawls will talk about cleaning, disinfecting, technology, etc. And then Dr. Hunter will talk to us a little bit about student services and transportation. And then we will discuss the possibility of a second work session at the beginning of next week as we make our final decision and our final announcement to the school district, to our staff, and to the general public. So at this point in time, we'll start with our COVID-19 update, and Dr. Ware and Ms. Ulch are going to lead off. Are the monitors up?
Yeah.
Okay.
No. Loose end is not.
While we're waiting, let me also, we've been made aware that at times, as we've done these board sessions the way we're doing them now, that people that are speaking in the audience, the people that are listening in the general public cannot hear. So if you don't have a microphone, we do have one in the center of the room, but if you are asked a question and need to respond, if you guys will either get to this mic or come to the podium to answer your questions, I would appreciate it.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the board. To give you a little history, just so we can have something to compare to, I've put information from the end of April, end of May, and end of June, so you could see the trend of our positive cases and deaths in South Carolina and in Newberry County. Okay. Looking at current statistics, as was reported yesterday, there were currently 60,220 positive cases, 984 deaths, with a percent positive of 21.5%. For Newberry County, there were 446 positive cases and 4 deaths. So compared to June 26, when we had little over 30,000 cases, positive cases in South Carolina, a little over 2 weeks later, we are at 60,000.
Ms. Ulch, is this positive test or positive diagnosis?
These are positive tests.
So there's a significant difference. There's been some discrepancies in the testing and the actual disease, haven't there?
No, there's some clinicians may make a probable diagnosis not based on the test result yet, but these positive cases are due to actual positive tests.
But we have a number of positive tests that have been defrauded in the last few weeks? Positive tests that are not positive. Are you acknowledging that? Are you just saying these are positive tests?
Correct. These are
Okay.
positive tests. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay, and then the death rate from 692 to 984 in a little over 2 weeks. They also look at the cumulative case rate per 100,000. So at the end of each week, they look at it for the week. So for South Carolina, the cumulative case rate is 1,086 per 100,000. And just to give a little comparison, also July 11th, some comparison of some other states. And just to acknowledge the hospitalization rate, as it stands now, statewide bed utilization rate 73, almost 74%. The last time we met in 624, beds occupied due to positive COVID cases or suspected COVID cases was 832, and it's currently, as of yesterday, 1,550. And then the death rate for South Carolina and for Newberry, to give that percentage. Just to give you an idea of breakdown by age group of positive cases, you can see our 21 to 30-year-old, the majority of percentage is in that group. And looking at that, that's for the state. But just to give a breakdown for our employees, the age range and how many employees we have in each age range. Of course, with each additional 10 years is a slighter increased risk of having complications due to COVID. Just to give you an idea. So the American Academy of Pediatrics has issued their guidance for school reentry, which is helpful. There are key points that I want to bring light to. We need to ensure that policies are flexible and respond to new information, that we revise and adapt strategies depending on the level of viral transmission in the school and throughout the community, that we ensure that the policies are feasible, appropriate for child and adolescent's developmental stage, that we consider accommodations needed to support vulnerable populations with the goal of safe return to school, exclude no child from school unless required in order to adhere to local public health mandates or because of unique medical needs, and then support the overall health and well-being of children, adolescents, their families, and their communities. And I want to stress also to support the overall health of our staff as well. These are just some comments recently based on some activity in our state. On July 11th, the DHEC Public Health Director was commenting based on the loss of, a tragic loss of one of our children in the state under 5 years of age. She continues to acknowledge that we are in a dire situation and no one's immune to the disease, but we have the power to make an impact with wearing our masks and social distancing. On July 12th, Dr. Bell was commented also in a DHEC article in response to the multi-system inflammation syndrome for children. And she says, we continue to see more and more young people, especially those under 20, contracting and spreading COVID-19. And again, she also stresses the importance of wearing masks and social distancing. So when we look at making plans, some of the big things that we need to consider, one is social distancing. So American Academy of Pediatrics states, evidence suggests that spacing as close as 3 feet may approach the benefits of 6 feet of space, particularly if students are wearing face coverings and are asymptomatic. South Carolina DHEC, to the extent possible, maintain at least 6 feet of distance between each person. And CDC, reiterating to practice social distancing, stay at least 6 feet. Considerations for cloth face coverings. American Academy of Pediatrics, evidence continues to mount on the importance of universal face coverings in interrupting the spread. Although ideal, universal face covering is not always possible in a school setting. DHEC, everyone should wear a cloth face covering in public settings when around people who don't live in the household. Social distancing, continue to keep 6 feet apart. And both stress, DHEC and CDC, that a cloth face covering is not a substitute for social distancing. And then CDC reiterates the 6 feet. Of course, we have awareness of those who are not able to wear a face covering. You know, maybe young children who tend to pull at it a lot, or maybe children with anxiety. Different things would play into that. We have a draft staff toolkit and a draft draft parent guardian toolkit for reopening that addresses health concerns, environmental controls, those types of things. And this whole process, without our families, our staff, we all have to work together to help decrease the spread as much as possible. And our goal, we won't ever eliminate the risk, but our goal is to mitigate it as much as possible. Are there any questions? And I know you'll get some more statistics when it comes to the county as far as the recent disease activity from DHEC a little later. And we've been very fortunate with the Department of Ed working on that Accelerate Ed document and asking for DHEC's input so we would know kind of where we are as far as disease activity in our county. Are there any questions about this?
I just wanted to share with you, I really appreciate what the American Academy of Pediatrics has done. I thought they've shed a lot of light on this to what we're concerned about. They started out one of their commentaries by saying the greatest harm to our children is to keep our schools closed, and that got my attention. And so as you look at South Carolina, I was trying to keep up with you on the numbers, but I understand we've had 1 COVID-related death and 2 MIS diagnoses.
Correct.
Has there been more that I'm not aware of?
Not pediatric. Now, I will say this, we closed schools right when we started seeing signs of an outbreak, so we really don't know what it's like with having schools in. And the Academy of Pediatrics, one of their things in that article that they strongly advocate that all policy considerations for the coming year should start with the goal of having students physically present in school. And I don't think any of us here deny that. Because that is the goal and that should be important. The main thing. But they also stress, too, you can't not look at what's happening in your community as well, because all those kind of trickle to, hospitalizations, healthcare workers. We've gotten an email in the past couple of weeks when the virus first started. The Hospital Association was just trying to get an idea to say, hey, with school nurses, if we need them, would you be willing? So there were multiple ones of us that signed up. Recently, they asked again, saying, well, we really need some people. First it was upstate. Now they're saying everywhere that they need, it would just be temporary for a few weeks. So our hospital systems are seeing that stress.
There are a few things, and where I want to go with this is to say that the risk to children is practically nothing. I'd like to kind of get that off the table if we could. They said that the risk of fatality to children is 0, that they can't measure it, that the risk of infection from child to child is 0.05, that children don't give it to other children, and that 90% of the tracking they did for the children that had an infection came from an adult.
I would say yes. With the time that this came out, it is believed that the transmission among children is not like it is from adult to adult.
Right. Okay.
And that an adult, it tends to pass down to a child. But we don't, in the very beginning, we didn't think there was a risk with pregnant women either. And now there's some indication that they have, not in our country, but that have tested babies who are testing positive after they're born. So I think, it's taking all these factors into account. Again, we mitigated that factor as far as school transmission to know. And I'll say, I know people, we talk about different countries. Sweden didn't shut down all their schools. They stayed open. And they, because they've done a compilation, it's not comprehensive, but of different countries, they're reopening plans to say, okay, we did require masks. We did require social distancing. This is kind of the impact on transmission. Now, what I would like to know is what their rate of transmission was before they opened back up. But for Sweden, for example, they never closed on the younger areas. Their impact on transmission was relatively high rate in children, suggests there may have been significant spread in schools. So I don't know that we know enough, really. I think what we do know, based on the experts who, is not me, but the epidemiologists in public health, is we know that social distancing works. We know that wearing a mask works to help flatten that curve. Those we do know. I think there's a lot of interesting research, and it's kind of on the cusp. You know, we're learning those things. But if we're looking at the facts and what we know that cases are rising in our state. I think today it's over 1,800. You know, I was trying to get the numbers and didn't want to mess up the PowerPoint. But so we're not seeing a flattening by any means. And Mr. Bledsoe, you are so correct. There's so many different sides to this coin. Our children need to be with us. I mean, nobody's disputing that. But we also want to make it safe for them as well, and our staff. Because when you look at, because there is a death rate, you know, when we're looking at the death rate in Newberry County, 0.9%. Well, you multiply that about, 0.9% doesn't seem a lot. But when you multiply that by the number of employees, or potentially the number of children, what that may equate to. And so I know there are a lot of decisions and things to be made. Like I said, I go back with the facts. I know the social distancing and the masks seem to work.
Ms. Olch, I read the same article that I think Mr. Bledsoe did, in which everything I'm reading, does say that it doesn't go from children to children. Right. But I think the concern, or at least some of the people I've talked to at the Department of Education, and again, I'm for getting them back in the schools right. too, but it's those children that carry it home or that carry it right. to the teachers, and that's what I'm hearing from the teachers, that the teachers, the kids may be okay, but if they take it home to a family, to a grandparent, or, to whomever, and even if you have the herd mentality as far as that, like what Sweden did, you've got those other countries over there, like Germany and Hong Kong. They just did a report, the other night on one of the NBC things where they showed the plexiglass around the children and wearing the mask, but then when you see pictures of people in public, you see everybody wearing masks, or the same thing in Germany, everybody's wearing masks in the public, and I think that's part of the problem, that why we've had such a hard time, with putting the kids back in school, is because we can't get the adults to do what they're supposed to do.
Right. And I will say, a lot of other countries who've decided to reopen, they have had those mitigation strategies in place. Like, we're wearing masks, we're going to work on the social distancing, so that does make a difference. Right. That has been proven, that those types of mitigation strategies help to flatten a curve. That definitely has been proven. And you're right, children may not be as sick. We tend to see more children who are asymptomatic. So that doesn't mean they don't have the disease. We're not testing all the children, but if that child's asymptomatic and then, like you said, goes home and there's a care, someone at high risk at home, then there's that risk. So there's multiple layers for sure.
One of the more practical ways to look at it is the daycares have been open through all this,
right.
and they've had no significant outbreak. I know the numbers are overwhelming. I know you're tired of looking at them, but on July the 6th of this year, 378 people in the United States died from COVID. You know how many other people in the United States died that day? 7,452. So we got to keep it in perspective. We can't be scared to move. This is where we are, and this is what we got to work through. And that's my point all along. I never discount the severity of this disease, right. But we can't let it stop us.
I completely agree.
Okay.
And when you look at other disease processes, it's not comparing apples to apples when you look at COVID death versus all the other factors or other deaths that may be that 7,000. The issue is trying to keep it to a point. Without those COVID deaths, those 7,000 deaths didn't cause the health system to reach a point where they're taxed and having ICU beds. So there are definitely a lot of factors to consider. Yeah.
I think the one thing that concerns me, and you had it on the screen, we got, I think I did quick math of about 150 employees over the age of 61, if you add those three categories up, something like that. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
That's the population that I'm most concerned with.
Sure.
I agree with Mr. Bledsoe. I think the children are probably the least of the concern as far as spread, but they could carry it not only to staff members, but back to grandmama and granddaddy.
Correct.
That's
And you'll see when Dr. Ware goes over survey results too, I think that is a real concern for our families as well, our families and our staff. So, and that's why I wanted to include this information because, and rightfully so, the article from American Academy of Pediatrics is focused on the children and the families, rightfully so, but we can't
forget about our staff.
That's right. That's right.
And of the younger staff, they may have some immune disorders or something like that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, we do. Any other questions?
Can you or will you identify like the top 5 underlying health conditions that we should be aware of? We don't have to do it today, but do you have that availability?
And that's in the toolkit as well.
Okay.
And that information is from CDC and DHEC. So we list all those, and again, and that's why we say in the toolkit, things can change because they may add more conditions.
Right.
So some that are higher risk, and the heart disease and obesity, and now with pregnant women as well. So there's a whole list of
Okay.
people who would be higher at risk for severe illness if they got COVID.
Gotcha.
Yep.
I have a question too, that something I had been reading too, it talks about the disease keeps mutating. Is that the reason why they keep adding the different symptoms that they're finding out? I mean, are they new symptoms, or they're just studying it long enough that more things are coming out?
As far as the symptoms or the people who are vulnerable, they have added more symptoms, because I think what ends up happening with any disease process is that you say, okay, the main ones at the beginning, the worsening cough, the new loss of taste or smell, and that wasn't even on there to begin with, the shortness of breath and the fever. So as more and more people go to the doctor, they get tested, they tell their symptoms, and then that information is compiled. And so we see a lot of our young folks who have just congestion, and they end up testing positive. So I think by gathering that data, the more that we see people being tested and going to the doctor and reporting those symptoms, that helps to compile that.
We got something going on with the sound system.
Yeah, it must be tired of me. Is there any other questions?
Could you print that off for me?
Oh, absolutely.
I'd like to have a copy of it.
Yeah, I'll be glad to. And, the purpose in developing the toolkit for the health concern is to provide as much as we can an environment that would help staff and parents feel as comfortable as they can.
And that toolkit, how extensive is it?
Let's see, the staff ones, I think 40-something pages. Because in it also includes like the letter that we would send to parents and staff, because they would follow. It has all the DHEC exclusion for COVID should somebody be around a positive, if they have a household member that's a positive. I mean, yeah.
I wouldn't want to kill that many trees, but I'm sure you've got that in the file.
I do, yes.
Send to it.
Yes, sir.
We can get you copies of it. We can send it to you.
You got two, one for staff and one for...
Staff is
Yes,
40-something pages, and the parent guardian is about 38, 39 pages.
I'd like to have that.
I've got some copies, and certainly in draft. Yeah, they're in draft. Absolutely.
That would be great, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Dr. Ware, family survey results.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board. On July 1st, we posted a survey for families, and we had it posted for about a week. I feel muffled, so. We had it posted for about a week. We sent a text out to parents that have their cell phone number in. All they had to do was click on the link. They were able to take the survey. we did an email, we did a phone message, and we posted it on our school website. So from that, we had 3,651 respondents. You can see how it's broken down by school as the number of respondents from each area. Then the grade levels. We had from 3-year-olds with 19 all the way up to 293 12th graders that responded to our survey. Well, the parents responded, and that's the grade level of the students. So what did we ask? We asked the parents, how do you feel about your child returning to school in August? 43.6% of the respondents felt comfortable with returning as long as the CDC and SCDHEC say it's okay. 37.1% felt uneasy about having their child return in August, and 19.3% do not think the child should return face-to-face until there is a vaccine. The next question, how comfortable are you with having your child wear a face cover at school? That's split almost right down the middle. 50.5% very comfortable, 49.5% said they're not. Which do you prefer for next school year? Implement e-learning for all children in the district, and the district provides devices and technology support for home use. That's 34.8%. Return to all face-to-face as long as it is safe per the DHEC and CDC guidelines. That's 33.5%. Return with some form of hybrid for all children, where we go part face-to-face and part e-learning as long as it is safe. 28.6% responded with that. And then we had 112 respondents, or 3.1%, say that their child would not be returning to the school district regardless of the proposed plan. So the next question we asked, so those 112 would respond to the next question, but we got a lot more than 112 responses. But it gives us a little bit of indication that we have some concern as far as the underlying health conditions of our respondents. So the caregivers responded that they have underlying health conditions, and then we had where they said that their child has an underlying health condition. Then you can see maybe in the pie graph where you got all those little lines, we had an option where people could give the reason, and so we had a lot of reasons there, but 12.3% basically said that it was not safe. And so going from why you're not returning to this, we didn't get a good indication as to why someone would not have their child return to our district. But it does give us some data about the underlying health conditions of our respondents. Our next question for the parents were about internet. How do you have internet at home? So we have 73.4% of the respondents that access the internet using multiple devices. 20% access it using only a phone. 6% because the service is not available. And 1% because they choose not to have internet access at home. Then our last question for our parents was about school bus participation and how we would get our students to school on the school bus. So 61.7% said that their child did not normally ride the school bus. 20% said that my child does ride the school bus, but, could not provide transportation, and so they would have to ride the school bus. And then 17.9% said that they could provide that transportation. So that was what we asked of our parents. Then we surveyed our employees at the same time. And we had the surveys active at the same exact time with our employees. We have about 950 full-time employees, and we had 888 respond. Again, we sent out a quick link to a text where they clicked on it. They were able to take the survey. We also emailed all of our district staff. So how do they feel? 32.4% in the red there felt uneasy. Comfortable, 56.9%, and do not think we should return face-to-face until there's a vaccine is 10.7%. The next question we asked was about wearing a face shield or face mask at school. 67.1% was comfortable, 32.9% not comfortable.
Dr. Ware, did anyone say why they were not comfortable wearing a mask?
We didn't give them the option on that question, Mr. Ham, but we did have some comments at the end, and some of our folks, our employees, do have some health conditions that don't allow for being covered that well.
All right. Our next one was, which do you prefer for next school year? And this is our employees. 43.8% return with some form of hybrid. 39.3% all face-to-face as long as it is safe. And 16.9% implement e-learning for all children. Then we asked, what best describes your situation? I do not have an underlying health condition. I do not care for someone who does. 59.3% of our employees don't have that. Then we have 24% have an increased risk posed by COVID-19 for severe illness due to age or underlying health condition. And we put the underlying health conditions and the little caveat to refer to the CDC website for the extensive list, but giving the idea of asthma, autoimmune disorder, diabetes, heart disease, pregnancy, so they could refer to that to know if they do qualify for that. We had 24% that responds that they do. And then 16.7% are caregivers to someone who has an underlying health condition. Because we're exploring every option as we plan for the upcoming school year, please select your comfort level with instruction. I feel most comfortable teaching either way. 44% of our teachers said, you tell me how you want me to do it and I got you. 24.4% only want to teach on site. 13.2% most comfortable teaching through e-learning. And then we had the 18% that question does not apply. So that concludes what we did with data for our survey to gather that information as to how our families felt, how our employees felt. Do you have any questions about the survey and any of the results?
Do you have a conclusion? It looks kind of like mixed results.
It's mixed. And I think, if we look at the metrics, if we pare it down, giving the specifics, I think we get a little bit better data. But I think our folks are flexible. Our teachers are great. They're going to do the best job possible. And that's what I think the survey tells us.
I have a question. How long was the survey out? Did you say 1 week?
It was out for a week. Yes, sir. We put it out on the 1st and took it down the 7th.
And didn't we say that after this meeting, all these results are going to be posted?
Yes, ma'am. And the schools will actually get a spreadsheet that will have their specific results to their schools, so they will know how their employees and families feel about each of the questions.
This that you've just shown us, is it going to be posted on the district website?
Yes, ma'am. I'll get that information out to everyone to be able to see the results.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. All right. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Carey for the next.
All right. The first thing I want to talk to you about is LEAP, which stands for Learn, Evaluate, Analyze, and Prepare. This is a mandate from the legislature that we bring our teachers back a week early, that being our pre-K through 8th grade teachers, and do a number of things. There's a lot of flexibility left up to the district, but it's not optional. We have to do it. So as I stated just a moment ago, it's required for grades pre-K through 8. Has to occur at the start of the traditional school calendar. We cannot intersperse it throughout the year because they said the funding for it, which the funds to pay the teachers this extra week of salary at their daily rate, will be coming from the state house, state department, both. So they will provide that to the districts to pay so that we can pay the teachers. But that money runs out in December or has to be spent by December 31st. But they still said there's no flexibility before the start of the calendar.
How much money are we talking for that week?
Oh, wow. I would have to refer that to the
Just a guesstimate. You can tell me later. That's fine.
Yeah, I was just saying, I'm not really sure, but they are prepared to reimburse us for that. That is something that they are going to reimburse us.
Okay. I was just curious.
And we will have to actually request those funds once we do it. I don't believe they send them up front. We will do that through
So is the requirement tied to taking the funds, or is the requirement?
The requirement right now is
when I spoke with Dr. Mathis at the State Department, he said the company line is that it's required. Do we have right now something in place to penalize you if you don't do it? No, you just won't get the money for your teachers. But if they don't teach, then
we don't
that
spend it.
wouldn't be an issue. But
That's why I was asking.
Okay.
I didn't know if the funds were because we did it, or right,
Yes.
or if the requirement was there and then we do get reimbursed.
So how will you know to staff or something like that? Will you have to make reservations ahead of time?
I'll get to that in a moment.
Okay.
Yes. So right now we have that slated to take place August 3rd through 7th because that is the week prior to the beginning of our calendar. Of course, today at 11 o'clock, all bets are off. So we'll entertain that and monitor and adjust if we need to. Students aren't required to attend all day or every day, and schools will schedule appointments for students and parents, so this could be paired, we hope, with registration maybe, and we are going to use that time for assessment. It is required by the legislature that we assess every student pre-K through grade 9 within the first 10 days of school. And Dr. Mathis said that this would be a great time to get those students in and do those assessments in very small groups. One assessment that's very labor intensive for our kindergarten students is KRA. So this one would enable us to make sure that those teachers have ample time to do that, and then they don't have to worry about time for testing once the instructional year starts. So that is the good thing about this. I feel like it would make our teachers' jobs easier when the school year starts. They could focus on actually teaching and not any kind of formative assessment. Just to continue, these are the activities. I just talked with you a little bit about diagnostic activities, and this would include continuing any special education evaluations that we had to stop back in March when we shut down. It can also be used for data analysis, continuing evaluations, and then professional development. It doesn't have to be, we don't have to have kids in the building for 7.5 hours each day. So our vision is that the schools would start working with parents and letting them know when their child needs to come in. Hopefully we could actually pair that with registration so they wouldn't have to come in at another time, and make it as much as seamless for them as possible.
Now, where it says professional development on there, is that when you're planning on doing the professional development for our teachers to be able to train them on the software that you're wanting to use?
The week following this week, the week of August 10th, is for teacher professional development, so there will be some then as well. The nice piece about this is they would have time to assess their students and then even meet in groups and do some professional development and data analysis together based on the results they're getting from that assessment. So we can do a number of things that may free up some time for during that week. We could have groups of teachers getting some e-learning PD, but then also carry that over into the following week for more data analysis based on these tests.
Okay, yeah, because that just seems to be something that I keep hearing reoccurring from the teachers, is that they're getting anxious and want to go ahead and get started on this, and even if we don't have our professional development days, that they have access to whatever the software is, just so they can play around with it to get themselves familiar with it.
Yes, that's a great point. And we've had some, I'll tell you, we have some rock star teachers. We have some who, once they heard we were going to do Schoology, they went out there, and I don't know how they found these groups. They found groups on Facebook.
Right.
They found all kinds of sites, and they are going full speed ahead. So, some of them aren't waiting for training, but it's coming. And I have a slide about that later in the presentation that gives you a little more specifics. But yes, that's definitely a need. All right, and then Mr. Suber, do you want to?
I'll be glad to. All right, the next thing we're going to cover, and it's in your PowerPoint, your slide that you're looking at, but I think at your place I had Nancy to put a copy of the latest report from DHEC about the recent disease activity by county. So you got it in two different places, if you will. Just a reminder that the metrics that we're going by, they monitor the county disease, either low, medium, or high, and the three metrics that are used are the 2-week cumulative incident rate. Metric 2 is the trend in incident rate, and then metric 3 is the 2-week % positive rate. And metric 1 is the 2-week incident rate, and that is the number of new cases in the prior 2 weeks per 100,000 people. If you're a low risk, it's 0 to 50. If it's medium, it's 51 to 200. And high is 201 or greater. Metric 2 refers to the trend in the incident rate. And that's the 2-week incident rate, whether it's increasing, decreasing, or whether it is stable as compared to the previous 2-week period. So if you're decreasing, you get a low rating. If you're stable, you get a medium rating. If you're increasing, you get a high rating. And then metric 3 that DHEC goes by is the 2-week % positive rate, and that is out of the number of individuals that have been tested. So it's the percentage of individuals who tested positive out of the number of individuals that were tested in the last 2 weeks. So if you're low, it's less than or equal to 5%. Medium range would be 5.1% to 9.9%, and high would be greater than or equal to 10%. So let's talk about Newberry County and what things look like for us. And the rates in the same categories as they are. This is the overall assessment. So what we've done at the bottom of this slide, oh, you need to see the slide, don't you? I'm sorry. What we've done at the bottom of this slide is the first, and I think I gave you a copy of this at our last board meeting, but the first report we got from DHEC on these metrics was issued on July the 5th of 2020, and it covered the period of June the 22nd to July the 5th. And then on the right side of that slide, the report that just came out, that's the new one that is at your place, the July 12th, 2020. That relates to the 2 weeks covering June the 29th to July 12th of 2020. And you can compare from July 5th to July 12th, and you can see the increases in the incident rate, which is metric 1. We went from a 454.3 on July the 5th to a 464.7. So obviously we are higher there, and I will call this to your attention. The 464.7 incident rate in cases is the 12th highest rate in the state of South Carolina as of July the 12th. The second metric is the trend in incident rate. In other words, are we staying medium, getting some decrease or some increase? Obviously, we had increase in metric 2, so we were rated high in that area in Newberry County. And then the third metric is that % positive compared to the % of people that had been tested. It was 10.8% in the July 5th report. In the July 12th report, it was 27.2% positive rate, and that is the 4th highest positive rate in the state of South Carolina. So Newberry is a hot spot, no doubt about it. The next slide is the traditional the scheduling, and that's low. In this scenario, that basically the three scenarios: the health guidelines facilitate considerations, allow for students and staff to return to a school building on a normal or a traditional schedule if you're rated low. We have not been rated low. If you are rated medium on the 3 metrics, you can go to a hybrid schedule, which is, they were calling it AB, we were calling it Group 1, Group 2, but as of the announcement from the governor today, the hybrid schedule at this point in time is not available anymore. That has been done away with, so I'll flip through the hybrid schedule, but it doesn't look like we're going to have to address that. And then if we are high based on the 3 metrics, it's supposed to be full distance learning. Obviously, that is now an option to us. If we had to on today, if we were starting school and we were going by these metrics, the recommendation from DHEC and from the State Department of Education would be that we would be fully virtual learning. But obviously, the announcement today, I'll get to in a minute, kind of contradicts that. Okay, Dr. Carey, if you will, e-learning and learning management system.
You asked about professional learning a few minutes ago. We are contracting with the STEM Centers SC to offer professional development that is based on best practices for e-learning beginning the week of August 3rd, which would be that leap week. And again, these dates are now in question because of the governor's announcement today, but that would be prior to school starting. And it would be ongoing. It would be, and it wouldn't be for all teachers initially because they can only accommodate 25 teachers at a time, and they have PD that they're pushing out all over the state. So we would serve as many teachers as we could who would be willing to go back and share with their peers. But then there would be check-ins every 4 to 6 weeks where they would continue to extend their learning. So it's not a one-and-done type professional development scenario. They would also provide, and we'll talk about our Newberry One e-learning institute in a moment, which would be just for those parents and students who choose virtual for the entire year. Those teachers would get more prescriptive professional development from STEM Centers SC as well, because obviously they would be using it a lot more, and it would be a daily basis.
I just want to make sure I understand. So you're saying that not all the teachers would have that option, that only just a handful of teachers are going to have it, and then that handful of teachers is supposed to come back and teach the other teachers?
Yeah, it will take some time to get that professional development out. Now, everyone would have access to the Schoology PD, which is what I'm getting ready to talk about next. That is our, as you found out at the last board meeting, that is our learning management system, and that platform enables us to provide students with a personalized experience, make communication and learning a more fluid and seamless process, allow our students and teachers to access resources and materials online all the time, engage students in online tasks and discussions, give students immediate feedback on assignments and assessments, and integrate with PowerSchool. And so every teacher would get PD on this as soon as we can get the onboarding process completed, and that we are looking at that being the last week in July, first week in August, that would be available to all of our teachers. We anticipate, like I said, that to begin the week of July 27th, hopefully, and we will use a train-the-trainer format for that, so there will be 2 to 3 people trained from each school by Schoology, and then those teachers would go out and train the rest of the staff on that format. The Schoology piece is the how we provide that e-learning platform, and how we put what we put on there and how it all works and how it fits into PowerSchool. The STEM Center PD is more of, okay, now I have the platform, what do I put on it? What does that look like? What does a virtual lesson actually look like? So that is the difference in the two. And then, like I just said, each school's TTL, which is our teacher technology leader, and principal or his or her designee would be trained first and tasked with training the rest of the staff. All right?
Just, and I don't know if this is the time to interject it, but with so many teachers having to learn and maybe being on a time schedule for when the schools start and making everybody feel comfortable and I don't know how much, like the media specialists that they have on them, that maybe adding somebody else in there besides just the one TTL, so that you've got a little bit more to help the whole.
Sure. Well, and that's up to the school. I can't remember, Ms. Singletary, how many slots we have per school, but it doesn't have to be the principal and the TTL. Definitely needs to be the TTL, but the principal's designee could easily be the media specialist. That's up to him or her how they want to handle that. And there may be more space available.
We start with 2 people per campus because it would be a virtual platform to feed the professional development from Schoology. So that was what they felt like they could accommodate, best practices to be able to train everybody effectively. If we need to adjust that and do a different route, obviously we can do that. I'm sorry.
Okay, we are also, after viewing the survey results, it was very clear that some parents, regardless of what our decision is as a school district, want an option for their child for e-learning for the entire year. And so we have begun to piece together what we believe that will look like. And what we have come up with is an offering for all students, pre-K through 12, for the duration of next school year. It would be completely virtual using the Schoology platform with live lessons, projects, assessments, and assignments, with dedicated virtual-only teachers for grades K through 12. That will look different for 3- and 4-year-old children because, as you can imagine, they do a lot of hands-on things and cutting, and they may need more packets and material-based things. We can't just send an iPad home with them and say, here you go, this is your e-learning. It will look much more robust than that. All core courses would be included in this program, but there is no guarantee that we would be able to feasibly offer every elective at all of the home schools. Students can reapply for admission back to their home school every 9 weeks. They get to the end of the 9 weeks and they realize it's not working for them. If we have space available back at the home school, and that was, of course, based on what we had before 11 o'clock, which was a possible hybrid schedule where we had to socially distance students and have a much smaller classroom. We'll have to make sure if we readmit any students that there is still space to be able to socially distance and follow these CDC guidelines in those classrooms. That's important. Students can also apply for admission to the virtual program every 9 weeks if they're doing face-to-face and they realize that's not working for them. They want a virtual format. If space is available for that, then that will be considered as well. But we will have an application process for this, but parents are going to have to confirm that they have reliable home internet access to be able to choose this option. We can't, even though we'll be providing a device, we can't have a robust e-learning program without internet access at home. That's going to be key. After the application deadline has passed, and we would like to push out the application to our parents and students as quickly as possible, perhaps even as early as tomorrow with your approval. But once that deadline has passed, we will begin to roster students and have to allocate teachers just like we would to a regular school. We will have to allocate our own teachers we already have to teach these children online. Because one thing that Accelerate Ed made very clear, and I agree 100%, we cannot expect a teacher to teach face-to-face and then also a cohort of kids virtually. So there will be a group of teachers whose only job will be to do e-learning with their students all year long, and they will not be in a physical classroom teaching students. And that's going to be a job. We're going to do, we're going to work hard, we're going to do the best we can, but we have no idea right now what these numbers are going to look like and how many parents will choose this option. So we're going to have to, and it's going to pull teachers from our other schools, from all of our schools, in order to pull this off.
Dr. Carey, we've got some certified teachers that are presently acting as reading interventionists. If we don't have enough teachers, will we be pulling those people back to a classroom?
Well, I would hope they would be providing face-to-face intervention at the school.
Well, depending on how many people we have opt for that. But I mean, that would be a resource we could pull from.
Well, the principals always, if you're talking about interventionists, the principals always have that option to allocate because they use their Title I funding for those folks. If you're talking about reading recovery, they need to be at that campus and providing that face-to-face instruction. We can't pull them to go do this because then there would be no one to serve the kids at the school.
So is our thought process that some of the teachers who've expressed a fear or concern going into the classroom might do this virtual teaching?
That's a possibility, but in my next bullet, they need to have strong technology skills. It would be a perfect world if those who have that concern also have wonderful technology skills. And just like we don't know how many parents are going to opt for this, we have no idea how many teachers are going to opt for this. And I feel sure there's going to be a hiring process for that. We're still working the bugs out with that and trying to determine what that will look like. But they will have to apply and prove that they have these skills that are going to be needed to teach these kids exclusively online. Yes, sir.
I want to know, how long have you had the e-learning program? Did we just purchase it, or how long have we?
Yes, we just purchased Schoology, and so it is brand new. Yes. If you'll remember, when we shut down in March, we were completely pencil paper packet based. So there will be no more of that, except, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, for maybe those small ones who you can't just give a computer to and leave alone. But yes, this is completely new for us.
So do we think a 9-week commitment is enough for a student to make to a program that we have to commit so much to? And teacher security?
Well, we had a lot of discussion about that in Cabinet. Some districts are doing semester. I'm not necessarily opposed to that either. We just have to make sure we don't want to, there's so much balancing included with because we're basically creating another school. We're going to call it a program, but it's basically another school. And so if we're going to be pulling teachers from different schools to teach and serve these kids, that means everything gets recalibrated back at that other school as well, where they get pulled from. So those class sizes get shuffled as well. And the last thing I want is a lot of back and forth that's going to make our classrooms in the brick and mortar building fluctuate, because that lack of consistency isn't good. So I would be open to semester as well.
I would too.
And do you believe that for elementary as well? Some districts are doing, because they're smaller children and if the child is failing at the end of 9 weeks, and there's no route to get that student back, do we still want to tie them to a semester?
I think you do semester until you have an extenuating circumstance. If the child's failing to succeed with virtual after 9 weeks or even after 6 weeks, if it's not working, okay, but it can't just be, well, I want to do this way today and this way tomorrow.
And if we err on the side of asking for a commitment of semester and you as a teacher say this student's really struggling, you make that personal decision to intervene
It
and change
would be
that.
no different than the superintendent saying,
Yeah.
well, Johnny's not doing well at this school. We think he can be successful over here.
But we won't have to shuffle all the teachers around if we do it for 1 or 2 students that
Right.
really struggle.
But the thing we discussed this, the thing we do want to stay away from is, I'm in, I'm out,
No.
I'm in, I'm
No,
out.
that's
Make
what I
a
was
decision,
saying.
but once you come out, you're out.
Right.
No, we don't want to do it because it's what I want to do would be a
What's that?
need in my
Exactly.
opinion.
You'd
Now,
have to have teacher input.
Teacher input,
Take them
this
out.
isn't working for Johnny, we need to try something different.
What I would like to do is before we make a final decision on the 9-week versus the semester, and we've got 4 of our principals here tonight or this afternoon that I asked to come, all grade levels are represented, all attendance areas are represented. But before we make a final decision on that, I would like for our principals to have some say-so in that because they're the ones that have to make those decisions at the building level.
Well, and I think the decision would start with them and the teacher, and then have to be approved by
I'm just talking about whether it's the 9-week interval or semester interval. Let our principals weigh in, and we can get you that answer by tomorrow, to be quite honest with you. That's not a problem.
Mr. Suber, I just have a question, and I don't know whether it was talked about it in your task force, but you were talking about the teachers that would have to apply would have to have strong technology background in order to be able to do it. Couldn't be just a teacher who has health concerns. I mean, for those teachers who have underlying conditions or true health concerns, I mean, what happens to those teachers? Do they just lose their job? You know,
Well, you
that's
could-
kind of being in the middle of a teacher shortage now. I mean,
Yes.
will they have an option there, or is their only option going to be that, you know, if they don't feel safe going in a classroom, but, you know, maybe they're willing to learn, but
Yeah,
don't
they
have
need
that
to be willing
strong.
to learn. I'm not going to say just, you know, with this from day one, starting for students e-learning, that's a huge learning curve, even for a teacher who's well-versed in technology. If it's someone who's not, you know, who struggles checking email and that kind of thing, I would be hesitant to do that for our children, because we have to provide the best quality
Right.
we possibly can. But of course, we need to take health considerations into account.
Right,
as
because
well.
I know
It's
that,
a
I mean,
diff-
those are a lot of teachers that I've heard from too,
Right.
is that what happens? I mean, if there's not a place for us there and there's not a place for us here, I mean, do we automatically lose our jobs?
Right, and
Well, the bottom line is, I think the numbers were 300 and some odd that had either a compromised immune system or were going home to someone that may be fragile. We don't have room for 200, 250 people to do virtual
Correct.
teaching, so we're
Right.
going to have to make some difficult decisions, and our employees are going to have to make some difficult decisions. And unfortunately, that's what today's information from the governor's office, that's the position we're in.
yeah, because prior to that, I felt like we were in a much better position given flexibility for those folks who did have health concerns. But I feel like a lot of that was, our options were lessened greatly at 11 o'clock today. All right, and like I mentioned earlier, we would love to notify and provide the application to students and parents as quickly as possible, because this is a big decision and we want them to have time. We were projecting a deadline of 10 days, 10 calendar days. Maybe that's, I feel like that's sufficient, but we need this information as quickly as possible if we start August 17th, because we've got to start getting teachers, you know, getting their application in, because they will have to apply to do this just like they would apply for a job at one of our schools if they wanted to transfer. This will be that same process. So we just have no idea what and who we're dealing with until we get this information out, and we would like to have it as quickly as possible so we can make the best possible plans.
If we're going to adjust our employees to fit this, does that mean that Dr. Ware is going to have to beat the bushes for more teachers at the school level?
It shouldn't. It shouldn't, because we would, just like we do when we get the counts of students who come that first week of school and we reevaluate and say, okay, Gallman has a class size of 30 kids in second grade, we need to take a look at that. Maybe we need to pull a teacher from Newberry Elementary because they have a lower class ratio and pull them over. It will be very similar to that. And we would be using the same classroom guidance that we use to staff our in-person schools for this.
And if we had teachers sign their contracts ready to go for the school year prior to this, and they don't feel comfortable, I'm assuming we will let them out of their contract?
Our normal procedure there is pending finding a suitable replacement after contracts are signed.
This is not normal.
I understand. We'll have to have that discussion.
That's right.
So we've got to have people to put in front of our children.
Will our distance learning students be privileged to any extracurricular activities at their home school if we initiate
Yes,
athletics
sir.
again?
And they were clear with that on the
Okay.
announcement. Yes, sir.
Yes, great question. And that also reminds me, a concern I have is students who opt for this being able to provide, particularly at the high school level, everything that they may want or have signed up for, such as the Career Center. So we're going to have to figure out what that may look like, because we can't, let's say we have several students interested in welding or who have already signed up for welding. We only have one welding teacher, so we can't ask him to teach welding on campus and then also teach these students virtually. So those students who choose that may have to go to the campus for that. If they choose virtual, they can have virtual for everything else, but if it's a very specialized course and they really want to have it, they'll have to go to the school to do that. That's not final, I'm thinking out loud,
Are we
but,
going to allow that mix and match? Mix and match.
or we don't allow it at
Welding,
all.
for instance, they have to go there. There's no virtual teaching.
Right.
of welding.
That's what I was thinking.
So I think if they choose the virtual, I'd be hard pressed to let them mix and match and pick and choose.
I definitely see what you're saying. I don't know what the answer is. We'll have to figure them out very quickly, though, very quickly.
Now, something that you looked at for like the teachers that you put in the e-learning portion of it, that will all the teachers be required to be on site like in a classroom as they do that learning? And will all schools follow the same policies? Or I mean, what have you discussed there?
Well, let me answer your first question. As far as will the Newberry 1 Institute students or teachers be required to be on campus in the classroom? We haven't had a lot of that discussion. One thing that is important to keep in mind, if we don't have that teacher occupying that class, we have more space to spread folks out.
That's right.
So if they have internet access at home, we've not ruled out whether, yes, you have to come to campus, no, you don't. I think whether we're in low, medium, or high spread should have a lot to do with that as well.
Well, okay, so just so that I understand, then the virtual teachers that you have are the Newberry 1, where like now if a teacher's going to be in a classroom at Mid-Carolina High School, then everybody answers to the principal there, or Newberry High School, everybody answers to the principal there. So these Newberry County 1 teachers, I guess that's what you said. I mean, now who will they go to?
That's a great question as well. We actually talked about that in my staff meeting earlier this afternoon, and it would either have to be somebody on my staff, or we would have to do something with someone in-house. Maybe we have a teacher or an assistant principal or someone who wants some extra leadership opportunities, and we pay them a stipend to be the director of the e-learning program. We could look at that. There's a lot of options, but they will need someone to answer to, and I don't believe it needs to be the homeschool principal, because they don't need to be. They have enough to worry about with the children physically.
Right. Well, that's the one thing that, again, just trying to read through my notes, because between all the emails and everything that I got, that just making sure that whatever we put out there, that it's the same for for all the schools. That if we're requiring this of teachers, or one principal's requiring this, then and another principal's not requiring that we want them all to have the same policies put in place and the same requirements.
But as far as whether they're teaching from home or teaching in the building, one of the other things, and this has come up multiple times, but if there is indeed a number of teachers that do have a compromised immune system and they're approved to go into the e-learning program because of that, if it's not safe for them to be at school, then we will approve for them to teach from home. So there will have to be some flexibility and some potential exceptions there as well.
And I have a question. I'm not sure if this is the time, but teachers asked me. if a teacher applied to be in this Newberry one, the e-learning, because of COVID, do they lose their position, so to speak, back at their home school? Like
No,
next
this is-
year, if we don't need all this e-learning, do they still have their
This is a
spot?
temporary 1 year, like, hope and pray. There's a vaccine after this year, and everything will be back to normal. We haven't discussed this. This is just Lynn talking, but I just feel like they go back to the home school they came from.
That's what I thought, but
Now, that being said, if there's a reason that school's enrollment has gone down and the school needs to cut, the number of teachers or something to that effect, then we would go back to whatever our HR policy says about last hired and that kind of thing. But this wouldn't factor into that at all. It would be like they never left.
As long as the position's there,
Yes,
it's there.
yeah.
right. That's what they were asking, yes.
Yes,
Wanted to know, have we thought about a later start date? Has that been something to have a conversation about? I've seen that at other districts where they've pushed it back by a week or two, so I'm just curious to know, is that a conversation that we're having, especially when we're talking about the training for the teachers and them not being capable of training like right this second so they can get caught up to speed? Is that something we're thinking about?
Yeah, Dr. Carey, if you'll go to the next slide, I was going to cover that, so Mr. Currington, we'll go ahead and talk about it now. If you saw the press conference today, the recommended start date was September the 8th for all students, so obviously that changes our school calendar, and that would provide that professional development time that you're talking about. Also would provide more time for us to get our LEAP program in gear and get it started as well. So we have had that conversation. Dr. Carey, I asked she and her staff to put together some draft calendars, and in an hour and a half between the end of our meeting and the announcement and you guys coming, they've got that done. So she's going to give you a couple of rough drafts of potential calendars that we would look at. But the recommended start date for our students, according to the governor, would be September the 8th. Obviously, we've already told you this, but the parents will have to have a choice as to whether they want their children in school for 5 consecutive days or Monday through Friday, or whether they want to go the virtual education route. As I told you previously, the hybrid schedule was deleted, but I'm just going to go ahead and tell you now, there are conversations taking place right now based on text I'm getting from different people and from different superintendents that the State Department is already having some conversation or some negotiations about the possibility of allowing a hybrid schedule of some kind. I don't know what that's going to turn out to be, but the bottom line is we're right now waiting on some guidance from the State Department, because right now we're sending to them what our plan is. That's due by Friday, and my understanding is we'll have a quick turnaround as to what we're going to do. But in what we're sending them, it really wasn't a defined program that we're doing. It really said, are you going to do traditional 5-day, are you going to do hybrid, or are you going to do virtual? It was just 3 bubbles. You check 1, 2, or all 3. So once they get that and they approve those and send them back, I'm sure there'll be some more conversation about exactly what these potential options look like. But for now, the hybrid schedule is off the table.
Has there been discussion with the governor's office or the State Department at having an abbreviated year and not hold us to 180 days?
Yes. Weeks ago, there was some conversation about abbreviated days.
Obviously, if we don't start till September the 8th,
we're going to be in
till the 24th.
June the 24th, somewhere along in there.
Yes, and Nancy and I just passed out, you'll see 3 calendars. The first one that isn't marked is our current calendar that you adopted. But then you see a COVID draft 1 and 2, and they're identical except one. I believe it's draft 1 has our LEAP program prior to our professional development, and draft 2 has our LEAP program after professional development. But they all start and end the same day. The breaks are all the same. And this isn't for a vote or anything. This is just for your information, because I just want to point out, and maybe I'm hoping we'll receive more guidance from the State Department, but this is a shock to our families. If we turn around and say we're going to start September 8th, we've got children in school until the 25th. And that's a shock not only to families but to teachers. Folks have plans made, and expectations of things they'll do in June, and I don't want them to think the school district it doesn't take any of that into consideration or take it lightly. So we share that with you, and for further discussion, maybe at a later date upon maybe some clarification or some changes from the state level.
Well, we don't really have any choice if the governor has mandated it. I mean, it's not up to the local district. I mean, that's at that point, then people need to get in touch with the governor or their legislators.
Well, he didn't
Well, he
mandate
used
it.
the word
He recommended
recommended.
it.
He didn't mandate it, that's
Okay.
right. He said if you were ready earlier, go ahead. But he
The
said he
word
would give you
recommended,
them.
it wasn't, it didn't say required, so that we may have some leeway there.
Can we start when we said we were going to start? Or are we not in a position to say that right now?
We could.
Okay.
We could. Would it be better to start a little bit later? That would give us time to get all of our devices in and rolled out, a little more time for professional development. So yeah, that would be helpful. I don't know. You just have to weigh which is the juice going to be worth the squeeze? Is it, we can be ready. We maybe have some more bumps and things ironed out if we started a little bit later, but at what cost?
Well, that was why
And
I
that's
had
what
the
everyone
questions
has to
about
ask.
the abbreviated year. Instead of having to make sure if we did start late, which in my mind, starting later is going to be a smoother transition, but then you got to worry about getting done by Christmas and getting out before July 1st. So that's why I asked the question if they would allow us to forego the 180 days, cut it down by 10, and that would help us out tremendously, I think. That way we would get both things done.
Sure.
Well,
Smooth transition and complete.
several weeks ago, before all this came about, several weeks ago, there was a conversation between the State Department of Education and the legislature as to any consideration of not doing 180 days and cutting that back, and the answer at that point in time was no, 180 days is expected because of the loss of time from March the 16th forward. But again, that could change. Every decision that has been made has been very fluid, and now you see why, because, I mean, I'm sure there's some negotiations going on right now between the State Department and the Governor's office. It could change tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, so, stay tuned. And for that reason, and I talked to Chairwoman Metz this morning about this, but it would be our recommendation either Monday or Tuesday of next week, somewhere maybe around 3 o'clock, that we do one more work session, because I think we are going to have some more information. But the bottom line is we made a commitment to the people of Newberry County that we would lay out our plans the week of July 20th, and that is next week. Monday is the 20th. So I would like for us to come back together either Monday or Tuesday, somewhere around 3 o'clock, lay out a final plan to you, and then we'll ask your approval of that, and then we'll put it out, because people, you're right, and I know you're getting bombarded with questions as well, but we need to make a final decision with the information that we've got, and we need to move on. Our people need to be getting ready. Our principals need to be working with their staff, and regardless of what the final decision is, we need to move on and get about the business of educating children. All right. I asked these principals to come, not to put them on the hot seat, but do you have any questions that would be building related, or principals, if you've got something that you want to share that you have heard today? Because we have not talked to these principals since this 11 o'clock meeting this morning. I asked them to come days ago.
Mr.
Can I-
Stuber, with your permission, can we take a brief recess for those that might need to
Absolutely.
have a break for
Dr.
a few
Gary,
minutes? And then
the
we can
LEAP
come
program
back and
started
talk
pre-K
to
through 8th. Is that for the year that we're just finished, or is this for the upcoming year? 2021?
Yes. 5 minutes?
Yeah, 5-minute recess.
Okay, let's take a 5-minute recess and come back in about 5 minutes, and we'll finish up.
I better take it. I don't want to need it.
Mr. Super, isn't our plan due by Friday to the governor? I mean, the state-
Yeah, but it's
It's just the bubble card. Okay.